Hello, my name is Obiols,
My name is Niklas Sandquist.
and we are looking at the question whether Delta Plastics should build a recycling facility in Texas in addition to Rodeo Plastics, which is their manufacturing facility.
So we're going to try to answer these questions by looking at the market, how big the market is, and other recycling companies that's out there already in Texas. We're also going to try to look into how big or how strong the competition of those recyclers are. And we're also going to try to answer if firms and construction firms are willing to collect these materials, and whenever they're done with the construction project, if they are able to collect the materials and then send them either over to us, or we are able to go there, collect them in, for example, with a dumpster or something like that.
So, yeah, based on all those questions and factors, we will at the end make our final recommendation of what Delta should do. Here we are looking at positive and negative aspects of the construction sheeting recycling market. On the positive side, this is a market that is rapidly growing because Texas is experiencing a population growth of around 1,000 people per day, which increases the demand for construction. Especially the Dallas, Austin, Houston, and San Antonio areas are rapidly growing. They are also large construction projects like firms building headquarters and things of that nature in these areas. So the long-term demand for construction sheeting and also for recycling would obviously be growing, which is a good thing. On the number side, the average construction site uses at least a couple thousand pounds of plastic, depending on the size, even more than that. So that is quite a large amount to collect from only one site, so you would not have to drive around and collect small amounts of plastic in different places, keeping costs kind of low. These plastics are also relatively clean, especially comparing them to say agricultural plastics, which would also keep the cost of recycling down. And landfilling, so throwing away plastics, costs around $100 to $400 per dumpster, which means that firms would have an interest in getting rid of their plastics in a cheaper way. But on the negative side, for whatever reason, construction firms are not very cooperative when it comes to throwing away or recycling plastics. They often just landfill it because it's the easier way to go. Transportation costs of hauling plastics are also relatively high since plastic takes up a fair amount of space. And you would have to compete with buyers for scrap plastic, and they are definitely out there, meaning they buy used plastic materials and either resell them or recycle them or ship them overseas or whatever they might do with them. So, talking about the competition amongst plastic recyclers, this is a map of recyclers in the state of Texas, which clearly shows that they are concentrated around the Houston and Dallas areas, which means that these are attractive sites to put a facility. We do not clearly know how much each of these firms buy or what types of plastic they recycle, since it's not always clear on their websites. But it definitely tells us that there's a market out there and that these standpoints of Houston and Dallas are in some way attractive.
So next we have pros and cons of competing with plastic recyclers. On the positive side, looking at a list of recyclers and buyers on plasticmarkets.org, most companies that buy plastics are not specialized in large truckloads of scrap plastics, so they pick up more of smaller amounts and sort the plastic and make their profit that way. There's also little competition in the Texas area, because most large-scale plastic recyclers are on either of the US coasts, so either on the west or east coast. So they're not willing to drive all the way to Texas to pick up plastic and buy plastic. So there's a part of the market that is not competitive yet. The cons are that some people buy plastics from constructors so that they actually receive money for those plastics, meaning that it would be hard to be competing with those, since it would probably not make sense to pay construction sites for their plastics, because it would be hard to make a profit recycling. And it's also difficult to compete with national level of buyers and recyclers, because they have scaled up to a level that Delta Plastics or Rodeo Plastic would not be able to compete with. So it would make sense to keep the business on a local scale. We found an example of BlackRock Plastics LLC, which is a national plastic buyer and recycler, and their business model is basically buying pretty much all types of plastics in larger quantities. They also offer services like truck drops or balers or trucking, so they come and pick up the plastics or pick up the dumpsters, and they operate in all 48 states. So this would be one model that could resemble what Delta Plastic might want to do. And next we have our solution proposal, and it is to set up a collection service in Texas, especially in the Dallas, Austin, Houston, and San Antonio area. That way we can keep the business local and avoid competing with most of the larger national recyclers. We would have to find a way to provide an incentive for customers to cooperate. For example, through free plastic pickup, which would save them tipping fees and would ensure us a constant supply of scrap plastics. Their supply should be large enough because the amount sold is around 500,000 plus pounds per customer a year. So having these customers put the used plastic back in dumpsters, then we would pick up the dumpster, and that should be a large enough amount to make the recycling facility profitable. If this would be a feasible strategy, we believe it would make sense to set up a recycling facility close to Rodeo Plastics' manufacturing facility.